Record. All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the June 2nd, 2022 public board meeting. And we are thrilled tonight to welcome Dr. Zapata, our special guest, who will speak about 7:30. So let's get going so we stay on track. As a reminder, we're here on Zoom. You know that, you're already here. Meetings include this slideshow, and then they are recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. And we will get those links here in the chat. Kim just reminded me to send her the link for that. So I will fix that and get that to her, and she will post them shortly. And you can sign up for our e-newsletter. The link for that will come too. All right. A quick review, we've started incorporating our community conversation agreements. We used to use these when we met in person, and I just have forgotten to put them in the slideshow. So they're real basic: respect others when they are talking, listen to understand, share ideas, ask questions, use I statements, one speaker at a time, disagree without being disagreeable, critique ideas, not people. If you tend to speak a lot, try listening more. If you tend to sit back and listen, consider speaking up more. Keep discussion focused on relevant topics and honor the time limits of the agenda. And definitely let me know if I'm falling off the wagon on that one. Our agenda is as follows, and there's actually probably going to be some adjustments because we do have a shortage of board members here today. One is had a prior commitment and one is unexpectedly sick. So we will likely not be electing officers because we don't have quorum. We need 5 for quorum, and I only see, I think, 3 of us here this evening. Also, we don't have a treasurer's report in June, error on the agenda. So we are going to have that again in July when we have a treasurer. If you have been at a prior meeting, you know that Kim Hill is our incoming treasurer. We just have to work through all of the red tape and paperwork and bureaucracy to make that actually official. But she's been training under Lynn, our previous treasurer, and is ready to take over. We'll do a quick introductions with your name and pronouns, how long you've lived or worked or owned a business or just been in the neighborhood in general. Maybe you come here for school or play, what meeting it is for you, how you heard about BDNA, and anything else. If you have a community announcement, let us know. We'll give you some time during that section. And I will go first, and then I'll just read down the line. If you don't want to introduce yourself, you can say pass or just stay silent. I am Chelsea Powers, she, her. I've been in the neighborhood about 6 years, and not my first meeting. And I first heard about the BDNA through a National Night Out event posted on Facebook. And you've heard enough from me already. So how about Kim Hill? You want to introduce yourself?
I think she needs to unmute. There we go.
True. It was technical difficulties this evening. How is everyone? Kim Hill, she, her pronouns. I've lived in the Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood for just under 5 years, and not my first meeting. I first heard about BDNA through a project that evolved into Soak Week, which we'll talk about later, and that's it.
Thank you, Kim. Derek, you're next on my list.
Sure, my pronouns are he, him, and I've been in the neighborhood since 2012, and I work as a realtor here for eXp Realty. It's my day job, and of course, lately I've been gathering signatures for Initiative Petition 17, which I'll talk about later, and that's pretty much it. Also, I do neighborhood outreach with new neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Shout out to Derek, who got me some flyers last minute for the walk that happened earlier this evening. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Linda, you're next on my list.
There you go. Hi, my name is Linda, and I am, my pronouns are she, her. I work over at the demonstration garden for Master Gardeners, and I've been there since 2017. I'm the co-coordinator of the garden, and I have been coming to these meetings for close to 3 years. So that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And Linda is also going to be our main contact when we partner on the sparrowhawk plant pickup in the fall. So if you are into plants, keep coming to meetings because that is coming soon. Let's see. Marisa, you're next on my list.
Hi, I'm Marisa Zapata, and I run the Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative, Portland State University. I live in St. John's, but I have been to your neighborhood. I first learned about y'all because in conjunction with the city of Portland, y'all applied to the Masters of Urban and Regional Planning to have a MERP workshop project. And so I have actually been to a neighborhood association meeting in that context.
That's awesome. Was it the neighborhood assessment that happened? Was it the most recent
I
one?
don't remember what the project was, to be honest.
If it was around 2017, that was the amazingly done neighborhood assessment, and that
would have
report is
probably been
still
it.
available.
The students really spoke highly of everyone in the neighborhood. So
Well, that was certainly one of our favorite projects. I will post a link to the report we're talking about in the chat when I have a moment. In the meantime, Mary Kay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My partner is also using the Wi-Fi, so I'm probably going to be camera off for a bit. But yeah, my name is Mary. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I moved here in March from New York, but this is my second meeting. I was here last month as well. And I heard, I scouted out what the community board was before I even moved here, because that's who I am. And that's it.
Awesome. We're so glad you're here. And next on my list is Kim DeLeo.
Hi, my name is Kim. She, her pronouns. I've lived in the neighborhood for 7 years, and I think I'm coming up on a year of meetings. And I first heard about BDNA. I sought out the neighborhood association, first on Facebook and then on the internet. And that was mostly for this meeting on Duke, which still exists. Anyway, I think that's it. Thanks.
Awesome. And Kim is our Southeast Uplift rep, so she does a little extra there. So we are appreciative of her. Anybody I missed that wanted to introduce themselves? All right. I do need to give a quick update on our agenda. I've heard from Dunya that she will not be giving her update on the Moose Lodge 4th of July, but we will get information up on our website when we know. And Pam will not be able to join us for the second half of the meeting for the community center report. She fell on the walk and got injured, so we will table that until July and give it more time and be able to have a robust discussion. So just know that our agenda is going to be a little shorter than expected, which means that Marisa can talk a little longer if she wants. But let's keep going since we've gotten through introductions to community announcements. We always start with Learning Gardens, Black Futures Farm, and Master Gardeners at the Green Thumb site. Let's see. Well, that's old information. My apologies. I don't have any updates from Black Futures Farm or Learning Gardens Lab, so I'm going to turn it over to Linda, who is going to report on Master Gardeners and tell us what's blooming there.
Well, looking at this photo, I reminded myself I need to update the picture because we have a lot more blooming than is in this picture. May was a great month at the garden, but we still had some strange weather. It almost seems like the strange weather is becoming the new normal. So we just have to take what we get. And the way I tell my granddaughter is, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Anyway, for June, we're starting to get our warm season crops in, tomatoes, zucchini, etc. And we're looking forward to hopefully better weather this month. And the last couple of days have been beautiful. So maybe that's what we're going to get. And we always have to remember in gardening, no rain, no green. And that's why we love Portland, is so green. Looking forward, we're just starting to plan a couple of events for summer. We are looking forward to being involved with the concert in the park, with having a couple of tables. And we're also starting to plan an August event in our demonstration garden. And it will actually be the first one that we've had there in quite a while. And it's going to be an open garden event, probably mid-August, where we will actually invite the public in to come and tour the demo garden and have classes, etc., for that day. So, and then as Chelsea said, we're looking forward also to being involved in the September Sparrowhawk plant sale with Brentwood-Darlington. So thank you very much. Oh, and always, everyone is always welcome at the garden during our open hours, which are 9 to noon, Monday through Thursday. Thank you.
That's so awesome. I'm looking forward to all of that fun stuff.
Yes.
And I can't wait to see what you do at the concert in the park for your table. So that'll be really fun. Let's see what's next on our agenda. We do have one more announcement for the Green Thumb site. The Community Transition Program, which is the other driveway from Learning Gardens Lab, they are having their half-off plant sale, and their last day is tomorrow. So if you missed out, go get half-price plants. And then I didn't see Mary Davis here for Leach Botanical, so I will go ahead and keep skipping. Oh, times tomorrow for the plant sale is 9:30 to 3 p.m. They are during school hours. So 9:30 to 3 p.m. You'll see the little plant sale sign will be out on 60th Avenue. And it's the greenhouse at the north entrance. It is usually pretty obvious, but greenhouse at the north entrance from 9:30 to 3. All right. School updates. The last day of school for PPS is June 10th. So make sure you are being more aware of kids walking, biking, playing, having fun during hours you would normally expect them to be contained in a building, for they will be wild in only a few days. And then a quick little announcement here. Miss Breen's 3rd grade class at Woodmere, which is the elementary school on Duke between 80th and 78th there. They are doing a donors choose for some comfy spaces for the students to read. They've apparently outgrown a lot of the wiggle chairs because they grow a lot, and are in need of some. It's not a very expensive project, so hopefully she can get it funded. And full disclosure, she is my kid's teacher, but this was sent to the neighborhood association. So. And as mentioned earlier, the concert in the park, we are going to be featuring Donna Jones and the delegation. That will be Friday, July 29th at Brentwood Park, 6:30 to 8:30. And Gail's not here, but if you love movies and concerts in the park, thank Gail when you see her, because she has been organizing them for a long time. And we'll have more info on food and or what food is going to be there once we've gotten confirmations on that. So there should be food, and I believe it's usually like a food truck and a dessert thing, maybe. So we'll figure it out. Arrow Heights Project Meet and Greet was moved to June 11th from 10 to noon. It's going to be there at the park. Where you meet at the park, those location details are coming. Apparently there will be free snacks, and PPR invites you to come check out the park. There's going to be what to expect during construction, other activities occurring in the park, and access to the community garden. So check that out. Those links will be in the chat shortly. Thank you, Kim, for doing that. I so appreciate it. Soak It Week. We are going to be distributing buckets June 18th from 11 to 1 at the Moose Lodge on Southeast 52nd Avenue. Thank you to the Moose Lodge for partnering. They are storing the 300 buckets and letting us host the event there. So a big shout out there. So if you missed out on your blue buckets last year, or you just need some new ones, definitely come to that event. If you're unfamiliar with Soak It Week, it is the last week of July and August, and it is where we encourage neighbors to water their trees to help them survive our long, hot summers, especially trees that are either newly established or haven't, or in that kind of like that, I think it was the 2 to 10-year-old range, where they're most vulnerable at most risk for climate change there. Kim, did I miss anything for Soak It Week?
Sounds good.
Awesome. And thanks to Kim too. She's been instrumental in that. You should have seen us all hauling buckets up from down from Northeast. That was comical. Dunya was going to talk about 4th of July at the Moose Lodge, but she's not here. I do know they are not selling fireworks this year. They are doing some sort of event, and BDNA is invited to partner if we would like to. I think the plans are still in motion. So if there's something you'd like to see or have happen, definitely let us know and we'll connect you with the right neighbors. And I hopefully will get more info on that to post and send out on our newsletter. And now you've heard plenty from me. We get to hear from Dr. Marisa Zapata, and I am excited to hear what she has to tell us tonight.
Wow, you have a little fancy picture of me up and everything. I am really excited to have a small group today. It's a lot easier, I think, to talk about homelessness when we can see each other, look at each other, and understand where people's questions are really coming from. I will confess that neighborhood association meetings are always like, this is a great opportunity to educate people, and also people might yell at me experience. And so I definitely want people to ask all the questions that they have. Don't worry about getting the language right. I know that people, want to do right by honoring people, but that shouldn't stop you from asking questions. I do also want to take a moment to say that even if y'all know each other pretty well, the odds that somebody in this Zoom room has experienced homelessness at some point in their life is pretty high. And so I just always like to remind people to honor that, people who are experiencing homelessness may not look how we think, and to just keep that at the center of the work. I do have a PowerPoint, but given that there's so few of us, I thought that maybe we could just start off with, what are some of your questions? I know that the overall prompt was what are the systemic causes of homelessness, and I can actually answer that very succinctly or with a lot of words. And so the succinct version of it is that it's the housing situation that we find ourselves in. And that's it, right? Everyone's always waiting for me to have a long list of 65 things, and I'm like, no, it's really just housing. And so that's kind of a starting point, but I'm happy to kind of go through the presentation, put the slides up, or just see what y'all are thinking about. I know some people show up to stuff and they're ready to be more passive.
I will let you know that we do post this up on our YouTube channel. So if it's something where the slides would be helpful to future viewers, I went ahead and made you a co-host, and you can take over screen share if you would like to, but if not, I think that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share the slides with you either way. I just think it's really a question of what y'all feel most excited about. I can also start the presentation, and then if y'all are like, oh my God, I want to jump in and ask questions, feel free to. I'm pretty informal as a presenter. Kim.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I'm just slow on the mute button tonight, so sorry about that. I thought it might be helpful to share with all of our new folks, and also with Dr. Marisa, correct? some of the background of why we wanted you to be here. Our board is very community minded, and we care about our neighbors. And we've had a lot of discussion about ways that we can be compassionate to our homeless and unhoused neighbors, but then also, you know, conversation about how hard it is that our neighbor has a tremendous number of folks who are unhoused, and also some of the associated community issues that come along with that. So I certainly hope that's helpful, and I mean that in the very best and collaborative spirit in sharing that.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And I think it just kind of lets us like rip off the Band-Aid. Like, homelessness sucks. It absolutely sucks. It sucks first and foremost for people who are experiencing homelessness. It is also awful for all of us to witness. And you know, there is like a whole cost discussion about the costs to our system for having homelessness. You know, some of it is probably things that you're imagining if you're seeing people who are sleeping outside or living in tents near you, which is, you know, having to pay for cleanups. I always like to point out, I'm actually an urban planner by training. Our cities were not designed to have people living outside in mass numbers. And so what we are seeing, I like to describe as the guts of the city, that we are actually usually quite good at not seeing. And so the reality is, like, the trash that can be accumulated when people are sleeping outside, that's trash that we would have accumulated, right? Like, it's things that we would have, but suddenly we're having to see it and witness it. In some cases that can be, you know, the situations can be unhygienic. Again, the biggest consequence is to people who are having to live like that, but it doesn't mean that it's also not impacting us. And I think it can get hard in these conversations, because trying to distill what is like I find it annoying to see that situation versus there are legitimate concerns versus I'm associating and attributing all of my community's challenges to people experiencing homelessness. So, you know, a great example of that is we were doing some analysis on next door conversations. You know, I actually had colleagues who wanted to go on to Nextdoor and read conversations. And, you know, a lot of the things that you would expect to pop up showed up with like, oh, my bike got stolen, go check the homeless camp. What was interesting was that even when people said my pet went missing, people would eventually invoke, go look in the homeless camp. And so it's like, okay, well, not everything is associated with people who are experiencing homelessness. So one of the things that we try to do at the center is help people kind of detangle what the things they're actually concerned are about. So people experiencing homelessness, I haven't updated everything with this year's point in time count numbers, but in 2020, it was about 5,000 people in Multnomah County experienced homelessness. Are y'all even in Multnomah County? Or are you like in Clackamas County? You're still in Multnomah. Okay. So when you think about that number, roughly half of them were sleeping outside, or what we call unsheltered. Unsheltered also includes people who were sleeping in cars and RVs and living in motels temporarily. And there's a whole reason for why that classification exists from HUD. But I know, like, people here will be like, well, that's people who are sleeping in tents only. Like, what's that count? And, you know, it all gets mixed together. When you think about the people who were in shelter in 2020, it was about the same number of people who were living in emergency shelters. What I think people lose sight of is that if you look at the Department of Education's numbers for families that are experiencing homelessness or unaccompanied youth who are experiencing homelessness, those numbers go up astronomically. And so in an analysis that we did on 2017 data, the difference was about 5,000 people across the year in the Tri-County region experienced unsheltered homelessness. However, when you took into account the students in K through 12 who were also experiencing homelessness, that number rose up to about 40,000. And so how we define and think about homelessness is instrumental to whether the situation you're actually most focused on is homelessness. Is it one type of homelessness? If we focus on that one type of homelessness, what are the consequences for everyone else? And then if what you're focused on is people who are sleeping in tents, particularly people who might be experienced acute mental health issues or substance use disorder, that's actually the smallest portion of the population experiencing homelessness. And so you end up in these like very interesting spaces where I'm trying to help people define what the problem they're actually worried about is. And so, you know, I always want to bring up the schools data uses a different definition of homelessness than the US Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so the big difference is this doubled up population. And a lot of people will still think about people being doubled up as like couch surfers. You know, for those of us who are Generation X, you know, it was like the burnout college graduate who just didn't want to go get a job. When in fact, it's actually, you know, people who are living now in dramatically and unsafe, overcrowded situations in apartments, people who are hosting people at violation of their risk or their own housing voucher, people who are letting people stay in unfinished basements or attics. And so, you know, as far as our center is concerned, that is all homelessness, and we need to be addressing that whole issue. Um, the reality is, and this is part of one of the things that I find the hardest to live with and to say, is that we are in such a hole when it comes to housing. We are so far behind. We have been so derelict for so long in providing quality and safe housing for people that this isn't going away quickly. Now, I think that we could definitely be pushing our governments to get housing brought online faster. But at the end of the day, we are going to be looking at people suffering for a little while longer. And I'm hoping that little while is like a year. I think it could be longer. And so, so it is this horrible thing where I am having to say to people, what you're seeing is awful. What that person is experiencing is awful. And unless we get our elected officials to bring housing online faster, it's not changing. So is that due to the city? The housing deficit is due to the well, okay, so this is like the history part of the talk. The our foundation of our country was emphasizing the idea that private property could be owned and housing was a private good. And so we never had a vision of housing as a human right. We never thought about housing as something that everyone should have. And then, of course, when we look at the foundations of the country, the notion of who could even own that housing was restricted to white, wealthy men. And so I always have to remind everyone, even like women could not own property back then. And, you know, we like couldn't get like a bank card until like the mid 1900s or something crazy. And then, of course, you know, we rendered and stole the land and property of Native American people. And we then, of course, classified Black people as people that could be owned, right? And so we've never actually provided housing for people, and we have crafted it as an investment and financial opportunity, starting with white men and wealthy white men to start with. So over time, we've continued to entrench on that idea of capitalism. And I always like to remind people that there is zero housing that will ever cost $0, right? It costs money to build, it costs money for supply. Why would anybody sell a house for lower than it costs to build? And we are in a situation right now that it costs so much to build that I think, I can't remember where we're people, I think as people making 50% of median household income couldn't even afford that, right? And so we are so trapped in this capitalistic framework, and I'm not going to be like an anti-capitalistic professor right now, but that is the reality, right? Like we're entrenched in a system that is never going to provide the housing that means that we have to provide it through public dollars. We did okay with that up until the late 70s, early 80s, and under the administration of Reagan in particular, there were significant federal rollbacks and programming. The federal government had been the #1 provider of affordable housing and public housing support, including the voucher program. But the president at that time and the legislative body cut those programs. They also cut mental health care programs. The mental health institutions were largely closed across the country. For many people, that was the start of what was supposed to be a good thing because the institutionalization practices were quite abhorrent. Unfortunately, there was supposed to be significant investments in community-based mental health support, including group homes and so forth, and that never happened. During that time, we also, of course, saw the war on drugs. Coming out of the 70s, really seeing escalations around cocaine, abuse of quaaludes, that of course then becomes opiates over time, right? So we really start to see those things take off. Since the 80s, that financial investment has even rolled back further from the federal government. There has also been the creation of policies like you can't modify affordable housing or fix it up that the government owns. So there are just endless barriers to actually even keeping the housing that we have accessible. Where the power of our localities comes in is being able to use land use policy and tenant protections to address intense market increases and market fluctuations. So, everyone who's been here for a little while, and Mary, I'm sure, wait, did you say you came from New York? Because you're probably like, my house is so cheap, my house is so cheap. And we're all like, no, no, no. When one of the biggest losses that we're facing, and the reason you see this intense spike on homelessness, is because property values escalated, and they escalated rapidly, and we did not intervene in that. So we did not set aside and protect naturally occurring affordable housing, right? And that's the housing that was affordable because it was simply affordable. We did not act soon enough to address mass evictions. We did not address the fact that as people were buying warehouses that maybe weren't used to turn into fancy lofts, that there would be people who lived in those warehouses, and now they're living outside. So they were already homeless, we just didn't know they were there. So we haven't been great about advancing those policies. We are on track now, and I think it's helping quite a bit. The passage at the state level of some tenant protections has been great. And then, of course, the Portland area has passed 3 massive revenue measures. I mean, they're quite historic nationally. We've got the city of Portland has a housing bond. Housing bonds are what's called bricks and sticks investments. So that's going to be for purchasing, renovating, or building affordable housing. The metro area, the metro regional government for the Tri-County area, also has its own housing bond, and then most recently passed what's called a supportive housing services measure, which is, I think it's even larger per capita than the one that was passed in Los Angeles. It's really game changing in the ability to support people on the cusp of becoming homeless or who are experiencing homelessness. So that was a very long answer to the question, but that's how I roll. I get excited. Mary.
Yeah. Coming from New York, it's a kind of different, I have a different sort of perspective, I guess. I'm going to lower my hands before I forget. Something I'm concerned about is that people are upset about how visible this is rather than like the roots of the problems.
Yeah.
And so, I can easily see a situation, I mean, and we see it in New York, where like, we'll just make it go, like, we'll just like not make it visible, and it'll still be like a rampant problem. And like, I'm like very fearful of having like looked at next door and those kinds of things, that like that's what you know what I mean, that's the issue. So I'm concerned about that. One thing I'm trying to figure out now is like, as an individual, like what should I advocate for? Because background, my aunt was an executive director of a charity in New York, and she helped build transitional and permanent housing for people who had been incarcerated. And so, and small transitional housing. So it was like not these massive homeless shelters. It was community based. It was really small. Nobody was like a face in the crowd. There was accountability, there was programming, like all these sorts of things. And those are extremely expensive. And also New York City, I don't think any mayor that she worked with had ever done anything to like reduce the amount of red tape to get these things up. So knowing that that was the case in New York, and it's a different but similar problem. They have similar kind of issues in New York. I'm just trying to figure out what should I be advocating for in like the near term. The long term makes sense to me, but the near term, I think I'm having trouble like prioritizing. Sorry,
Yeah, I
long
mean,
question.
it's totally overwhelming. And one of the things when I talk to journalists, I say like, quit focusing on whether we're going to put porta potties out or not, right? Like that's important, but that doesn't actually solve homelessness. And then I start to explain like, how do we make housing happen better and faster? And everyone's eyes glaze over, because it's really hard to figure out like, how do we get housing done faster? And then you suddenly got a zillion lawyers and construction people, and everyone's like talking about pro formas and what does a pro forma look like? And it's pretty tough to plug in. There are definitely some groups who are doing that work, and I'm happy to share their names. It's sometimes easier for me to say what not to do than what to do. I do want to pause and say part of the difference, and for those of y'all who have ever been on the East Coast, things look quite differently in terms of homelessness when compared to here, because New York invested significantly in a shelter system. The West Coast looked at what happened to the East Coast, which was massive investment in shelter and then never actual investment in housing, and said, we're not doing that. Give us the money for housing. And we don't want to do that kind of investment in a shelter system. We also had the luxury of having more temperate weather, right? And so it wasn't as, and particularly before the last couple of years, we weren't having to do like wildfire emergency and snow emergencies in the same year. So this was a very conscious choice that providers stand by and policymakers stand by. But what the consequence of that is now we are seeing the tide change around all of the progressive cities, going from like, we can make do, to being like, no, get everyone out of my eyesight. And one of the things that I find hardest about that conversation is that I think there are people who are actually like, I am so upset and so moved. Like I'll go work at if we do a pod village, I'll go work at one, I'll volunteer at one to help people. This has to be better than the current circumstance. That's not necessarily actually true or what is wanted by people who are living outside. But then there are people who are just like, I just want to make a bunch of pod villages and make everyone go away, which also can't be done legally. So the toughest thing I think with some of the current conversations is the politics are deep and overwhelming. The campaigning is deep and overwhelming. I would definitely say, I can't do this here, but I'm happy to have a side conversation. But I would say dig into who is running for what offices, because there are real consequences to that pathway around homelessness and housing choices that will be coming up. And then, it's really, I think, talking to neighbors and figuring out what are the things that are upsetting you the most, right? If it's trash, right? Like people are organizing mutual aid groups left and right to go pick up trash. Is it needles, right? So, okay, can we, take needle boxes, red boxes, syringe collection boxes out to people and have them use them? Bathrooms are tougher if you're in a lower density area, right? But, are there businesses that are willing to welcome people? The city has put out porta potties. I don't know if they have any in your neighborhood. but they are going to do more of them. So it's thinking very carefully about, I try to think about like supporting people who are unsheltered right now as us, asking people what they want and then having the lightest touch we possibly can while pushing as hard as humanly possible to have housing become a choice faster, right? Very few people want to stay outside. And that's also one of the things that I think it's hard because, you'll always be like, someone will be like, well, I asked like Ted, who's sleeping in a tent down the street, and he said he wants to stay outside forever. And I'm like, okay, well, one, was Ted telling you the truth or did he just find you annoying, right? And even if Ted is saying that, why is he saying that? Like, how many people have failed him to get into housing? How many assumptions is what he's imagining, right? Is he imagining that really great community that Mary was talking about? Or is he imagining a, skyscraper that isn't upkept and everyone is yelling at each other and fighting in the hallways, right? So we actually have to figure some of that. Yes, also a survey population of what, but it happens all the time because then someone goes, you say that, and then someone goes, ask 3 more people. So yeah, so I think that it's really, holding elected officials to the fire over why we can't have housing happen faster. And I can't fully tell you why it's not happening faster. It's really like befuddling to me that in this context of this massive emergency, there is not like every effort to get more housing. And a simple example is okay, I'm a super nerd. I found like buildings that were new buildings that had never been lived in and were for sale on Redfin. Luxury buildings. I found 125 units and they cost more than we would normally pay for affordable housing units, but not that much more. And I sent them to every local government person. They're not buying them. And I'm just like, okay, but you want to spend like millions on camps and rest villages and porta potties when we could have just bought some housing units. The other thing, Mary, that you said I think is really important is that none of this is cheap, right? None of it is inexpensive. All of it costs a lot. And so one of the things I'll do is run around being like, tax me more, just make housing happen, tax me more. So, it is really thinking about what you can lift up in that capacity. So joining the groups that are trying to push to get housing to happen. I am part of a group that's called the 3,000 campaign. And we've been trying to push the city to think about, if, instead of doing 3,000 people in camps, find 3,000 more housing units faster. And here are some ideas on how to make that work. But I think the biggest thing is to stay out of this is the best thing to do for people who are unsheltered debate, because almost everyone is wrong because it's all just bad. And so, yeah, I don't know if that helps at all. Your land use committee could be like really yelling at the BPS planners. What is going on? And then you can talk to the housing planners too, PHB. Why don't we have more housing faster? Chelsea, I'm not going to call on y'all. Can we just like say the things?
Yeah.
I feel weird. There's like 9 of us here.
We're being polite. We're well trained. What you were saying about you don't know why more housing isn't happening faster ties into my question. What are they doing, or how do we advocate for more employees to actually do the stuff to get it through? Because here's what I've noticed as someone who's had friends in the system and failed by the system. So my friend was houseless with their special needs son for 6 months because their paperwork was lost on somebody's desk, and then that person got sick, and then that person was out of town, and there was nobody else because all the government bureaus, all the public employees, and like we already know schools, everything's running on a skeleton crew. So you can't get a project through BPS or PBOT that wasn't already planned 5 years ago because there are no planners available. And when we ask for projects, we're like, we will find the money. Like money is not an object here. They're like, we don't have planners available for 5 years. So we can't even look at your project or something like that. But it's like, there's nobody to do the work for anything that's not already being done. All the bureaus are understaffed and they're assigned so many projects, and then there's all this red tape. So like, I feel like that's an kind of a skipped around subject of like, even if we had all this housing, who's going to process all of the applications? Who's going to help everybody get in? Where are the mental health workers that we are also short on, who are going to do the counseling to help people? Like, we don't have the people for that middle part of the paperwork and the healthcare.
This is actually the thing that gives me the most heartburn, because articulating this, first of all, is very confusing. And then there is the like, everyone is selfish thing that comes up in this conversation. We absolutely need a bunch more people doing the work. And that's on the government side and on the social services side. The SHS measure that went through does actually have a lot of money for capacity building. It won't go to like the city planners, but like the Joint Office of Homeless Services, I think is gonna like double its staff. But also doubling the staff takes time. Hiring people, training people, getting them ready to go. That is partly why, you know, if we get housing units faster, can anybody actually move in tomorrow? Probably not, right? Because there's like a lot of system things, but I just think that, you know, by the time the government buys a building, it'll still be a year from now. So maybe some of those capacity issues will be done. So there's a few things that are going on that you could start engaging the city budget discussion on right now. The service providers are fighting for an increased wage at the city budget level to be able to pay their employees more. And the issue there is that these are obviously high burnout jobs and people are not well compensated. And the sad reality is that because so many people are trying to live the ethos of hiring people who know the work, people are exiting homelessness and then getting these low paying jobs and then not being able to exit poverty because the job that they're getting isn't going to get them anywhere long term. But that is, you know, that pay, the city burnout issues are also huge. The city budget is going on right now. So I would say like the biggest thing you can do is go talk to the electeds. Every single one of them, unfortunately, because we're commissioner form of government. And so it is making that case and the potentially doing it in alliance with other people who are pushing these issues. I happen to know that the service providers are doing this work. So that's a group that, you know, if you wanted to be connected to, I could say, you know, you're a community member who might be wanting to write a letter in support or meet with people. But the budget as a whole, you will always hear electeds complain about funding their own staff. And so making sure that you're supporting those hires through the budget process. And then also making sure those hires are the right hires, right? Like, you know, not everybody has our same passions about things. And so, and we know we do need a lot of people doing a lot of things. So how do you make that work? So I think that those are some of the things. The mental health one is actually the most terrifying one to me. And this is especially for communities of color. We know that communities of color are historically underserved or racialized in the healthcare system. And there is no other specialty that is as important to have a person of color helping another person of color than psychiatric support or in licensed social work or whatever the range of psychology options are. We already, as you said, have a massive dearth of mental health providers. Then you get into mental health providers who are willing to work long-term or able to work long-term with people who are in significant need. I mean, let's talk about burnout. And then you add the dimension of people of color in that space. And it actually just, it's very, very hard to even talk about because, you know, I want everyone to be helped and I'm watching us not put together a pipeline fast enough to recruit mental health workers from out of state while also building our training pipeline in state to that we'll have people who are ready to go and work. And I am afraid that what we're going to be doing is potentially making racial disparities worse. Because even if we manage to bring in providers, and if they're not equipped to help people of color, then we've entrenched the same thing because we haven't laid it out ahead of time. And, you know, everyone knows about it, but I haven't really seen what I think would be serious movement towards it. But the wages are one of the biggest thing, right? If people can't pay real money to folks, then we're not going to get people who are willing to move here and do the work. And this is one of the areas where, you know, Zoom is great, but there are limitations and there has to be some face-to-face work. Kim.
I just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions, and these are just like, you know, thinking about how dynamic your talk is, and really feeling so excited to actually have good information about this. And it feels like it would be very natural to have you or some of your students, whatever is appropriate, keep us in the loop for going forward, because I know that we have in the past included links to stuff, and you know, it is at the grassroots level, there are folks who, you know, we can potentially organize to share, and I think that's very helpful. And then also it would be so lovely to have you back in the next couple months. I know that there are folks who have been interested in this conversation who can't be here today, and it would be so so gratifying to have, even just for you to rewind and just share exactly what you shared today. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, no, absolutely. Happy to do it. And I'll send you the links. We have a newsletter. So that's one of the best ways to stay informed. And then, you know, we have a Twitter account, an Instagram account. Our Instagram account is the most popular thing, so of all of them. And then I have a Twitter account. And those are some of the best ways to just like see what we're posting regularly. I've like had to dial back on my spicy commentary on Twitter. I picked up like some unsavory following happening. So it's more like, here's a report. But yeah, and I'm also just always happy to connect people to each other and try to make this work go forward. Do other people have questions?
I'm hoping that you will post links to all those things you mentioned in the chat.
All right, hold on. Here I go. Here I go.
And as she does that, are there any more questions or comments?
I can multitask.
All right. While you multitask, I'm going to do an announcement that I forgot, if that's all right. I just have to get my slideshow back up. You guys get to see my ears. Sorry, I'm always running two machines. Please hold for technical difficulties. All right, so if there are no other questions for Dr. Marisa, I'm going to say thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you so much. This was great. And if you missed any part of this talk, it will be up on YouTube as soon as I get it posted, hopefully in the next few days. And before we go to our break, I wanted to remind neighbors about the Lower Southeast Rising Project. And Kim, I will give you the link for that. I totally, because I went to it, I forgot to include it in our links. So we had the one on 52nd Avenue this evening, and next week from Tuesday, June 14th from 5:30 to 6:45, there will be another one on Southeast 72nd, and it looked like it was a good turnout and everybody was really interested. So definitely check that out, and we'll get the link to the open house and the survey in the chat. And any other questions or comments before we go on break?
I just wanted to say thank y'all and just encourage you to keep staying strong. I know it's hard. It's hard for a lot of reasons, and we just have to dig in together and try to get housing and support staff and everyone here to help our community members.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to pause the recording and we're going to go to break. See you all at 8:05. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to start our second hour off with our 2022-23 board members. Congratulations to Kim, Dunya, Derek, Gail, and myself. We are on the board. And I know that Kim Hill wanted to be there and had a conflict and couldn't make it. And we will elect, we can add additional board members at our next board meeting when we have quorum. So unfortunately tonight we do not, so we will not be electing officers and we get to skip the whole next part of our meeting. Pam is not able to be here for the community center update tonight, so she will be doing that in July. For those of you who aren't familiar with the community center project, the Brentwood-Darlington Community Center is run by Impact Northwest, and there's an ongoing issue trying to figure out who actually owns the building. There's a title issue, and it has become a maintenance issue now because Impact Northwest cannot get loans to make repairs to the building because they do not hold the title, and it is starting to become detrimental to the care of the building. And so we are working on a solution for that. Pam and Stephanie Frederick, our former land use chair, have been working on this project. So I'm going to let her next month give a much better update than that, just giving a quick little overview. So everybody is excited to hear about that next month in July. And our July meeting, just since we're talking about it, will be July 7th. Same time, same Zoom channel. Let's see. So we get to skip through this. And do we have committee reports and other updates? Kim DeLeo, do we have an update for Southeast Uplift, or is this our off month?
This is the off month.
Awesome. I will let you know that they had a grant mixer earlier this evening for all those who received grants. So that was something they did. That's all I know. And if you're a board member and you signed up for the orientation, please remember that the board member orientation is on June 7th. Anything else? Or do we want to have the best June meeting ever where we end almost an hour early? All right. Remember, this video will be up on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who came. Have a fantastic June 2nd. And we are ending the meeting here at 8:08. See you later, neighbors.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Bye.